The air was thick with sweat and the sharp tang of metal in the training yard, where a dozen recruits stood in a loose semicircle, their eyes fixed on the small figure at the center. She was barely 5 feet tall, her frame slight under the oversized combat gear, her dark hair pulled into a tight braid that swayed as she shifted her weight. The recruits whispered, their smirks barely hidden. "Deadweight," one muttered, loud enough for her to hear. Her name was Lena Carter, and she was the smallest, quietest recruit in the elite military training program, a program that chewed up and spat out even the toughest. The instructor, a towering man named Sergeant Holt with a scar running down his cheek like a warning, loomed over her. "Carter," he barked, his voice like gravel, "you sure you belong here?" The crowd snickered, but Lena's eyes didn't waver. She stood still, her face unreadable, her hands steady. In 3 seconds, she would prove them all wrong. "Hey, if you're hooked already, hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat." Let's dive into how Lena became the recruit no one saw coming. Lena wasn't supposed to be here. Growing up in a small Ohio town, she was the girl who faded into the background. Her father, a mechanic with hands always stained black, told her stories of his days in the army, but he'd laugh when she said she wanted to enlist. "You're too soft, kid," he'd say, ruffling her hair. Her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, worried Lena was too fragile for the world's harsh edges. At school, she was invisibly never the athlete, never the loud one. But Lena had a fire inside, one she kept hidden. She'd spend nights in her room, studying martial arts videos, practicing moves in the dark until her muscles burned. She wasn't strong in the way people expected, but she was relentless. When she turned 18, she signed up for the military's toughest training program, a grueling 6-month gauntlet designed to forge elite operatives. Her family thought she'd wash out in a week. The recruiters raised their eyebrows when she walked in, barely 100 pounds, her voice soft but steady. They let her in, half out of pity, half out of curiosity. Now, standing in that dusty training yard, she was the punchline of every joke. The first week was hell. The recruits, mostly men, all bigger, louder, and brasher than Lena, ran circles around her in drills. They carried logs twice her weight, scaled walls she could barely reach, and laughed when she lagged behind. "Deadweight," they called her, the nickname sticking like mud. Sergeant Holt didn't help. He was a legend, a combat veteran who'd taken down insurgents in hand-to-hand fights, his presence enough to make grown men flinch. He rode Lena hardest of all, his voice dripping with disdain. "Carter, you're slowing us down," he'd growl during runs, his boots kicking up dust as he passed her. But Lena didn't complain. She didn't cry. She just kept going, her jaw set, her eyes sharp. At night, while the others collapsed in their bunks, she'd slip out to the training mats, practicing moves she'd memorized from years of watching grainy YouTube tutorials. She wasn't just learning as she was studying her opponents, watching how they moved, where they were weak. The other recruits didn't see it. To them, Lena was a liability, someone who'd get them killed in a real mission. They'd mock her openly now, tossing her gear into the mud, accidentally bumping her during sparring. One recruit, a cocky ex-football player named Jake, was the worst. He'd tower over her, grinning, saying, "Go home, Deadweight, this ain't your world." Lena never responded, but her silence wasn't weakness, it was calculation. She noticed Jake's lazy footwork, how he relied on brute strength. She saw how Holt favored power over precision, how he underestimated anyone smaller than him. She filed it all away, waiting. The tension in the camp grew thicker each day, the recruits' taunts sharper, Holt's patience thinner. Something was going to break. It happened on the 23rd day. The training yard was set for hand-to-hand combat drills, the kind that separated the strong from the unbreakable. Holt stood in the center, arms crossed, his scar catching the morning sun. "Today," he said, "you face me one at a time. Show me you belong." The recruits exchanged nervous glances. Holt wasn't just an instructor, he was a machine, 6'4", built like a tank, with a reputation for sending recruits to the infirmary. One by one, they stepped up. Jake went first, all swagger, throwing heavy punches that Holt dodged effortlessly before pinning him in seconds. The others fared no better. Some lasted a minute, most less. Bruises bloomed, egos shattered. Then Holt's eyes landed on Lena. "Carter," he called, his voice mocking. "Let's see if you can last 10 seconds." The recruits laughed. A low, cruel sound. Lena stepped forward, her boots silent on the dirt. She looked small, almost fragile, her gear hanging loose on her frame. Jake leaned to the guy next to him, whispering, "This'll be quick." Holt cracked his knuckles, smirking. "Come on, Deadweight, show me something." Lena didn't flinch. She stood light on her feet, her eyes locked on Holt's. The whistle blew, and the yard went quiet. Holt lunged, his fist aiming for her shoulder, expecting an easy takedown. But Lena moved fast. She sidestepped, her body a blur, and used Holt's momentum against him. In one fluid motion, she grabbed his wrist, twisted, and drove her elbow into the soft spot behind his knee. Holt stumbled, shock flashing across his face. Before he could recover, Lena hooked his ankle and yanked, sending him crashing to the ground. 3 seconds. The yard was silent, the recruit's jaws slack. Holt lay there, stunned, as Lena stood over him, breathing steady, her face calm but her eyes burning. The aftermath was chaos. The recruits didn't know whether to cheer or stare. Jake's face was red, his bravado gone. Holt got to his feet, brushing off his uniform, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed he might lash out, but then he nodded, just once, and said, "Not bad, Carter." It wasn't praise, it was respect, hard-earned and rare. The nickname Deadweight died that day. Lena didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She'd done what no one expected, and the comp's dynamic shifted. The recruits stopped mocking her, some even started watching her, trying to figure out how she'd done it. Jake avoided her eyes now, his taunts replaced by grudging silence. But Lena wasn't done. That moment was just the beginning. Over the next weeks, Lena's quiet strength became impossible to ignore. She wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but she was the smartest. In strategy drills, she outmaneuvered teams twice her size, using terrain and timing to her advantage. In sparring, she took down opponents who outweighed her by 50 pounds, her movements precise, almost surgical. Holt started calling on her to demonstrate techniques, his tone no longer mocking. The other recruits began to follow her lead, not out of fear but out of awe. She wasn't just surviving the program, she was rewriting what it meant to belong. But the real test came during the final exercise, a simulated mission in dense forest terrain, a high-stakes operation where recruits had to infiltrate an enemy camp, retrieve intel, and escape undetected. Failure meant washing out. The team was split into squads, and Lena was paired with Jake and 2 others. Jake, still stinging from her takedown of Holt, muttered, "Don't screw this up, Carter." Lena ignored him, her focus on the mission. The forest was a maze of shadows, the air heavy with a threat of ambush. Their squad moved cautiously, but Jake's impatience got the better of him. He pushed ahead, ignoring Lena's whispered warnings, and triggered a tripwire. Alarms blared, and the enemy played by instructors swarmed. Panic set in. Jake froze, his bravado useless now. The other 2 recruits scrambled, but Lena stayed calm. She grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him behind a tree as gun fury blanks, but terrifying a rip through the air. "Stay low," she hissed, her voice steady. She scanned the chaos, spotting a narrow path through the underbrush. "Follow me." Jake, for once, didn't argue. Lena led them through the forest, using every trick she'd learned, moving silently, reading the terrain, anticipating the enemy's moves. She took out 2 instructors with simulated strikes, her speed and precision unnerving. By the time they reached the intel, the other squads were pinned down or captured. Lena's squad was the only one to make it out, intel in hand, mission complete. Back at base, the debrief was electric. Holt stood before the recruits, his face stern but his eyes gleaming. "One squad succeeded," he said. "Carter's." The room went quiet. Jake, still shaken, looked at Lena with something new or respect. Holt continued, "She didn't just follow orders, she adapted, led, and won. That's what this program is about." Lena stood there, her heart pounding, but her face calm. She'd proven herself, not just to Holt or the recruits, but to herself. When graduation came, Lena stood among the elite, her name no longer a whisper but a legend. She wasn't the loudest or the biggest, but she was the one they'd never forget. Her family was there, her father's eyes wet with pride, her mother clutching her hand. Lena had changed, not into someone else, but into the person she'd always been in Sadia, unbreakable, relentless, a force. As she accepted her badge, Holt approached her, his scar catching the light. "You're going far, Carter," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Lena nodded, a small smile breaking through. She'd done more than survive. She'd rewritten the story. And that's the story of Lena Carter, the recruit they called Deadweight, who turned the tables and became a legend in 3 seconds flat. What about you? From which part of the country are you watching this video? Drop it in the comments below, and let's see where Lena's story is reaching.